This video is brought to you by Miniature Market. Thousands of board games, discounted prices, miniaturemarket.com.
Hello my friends, the Game Boy Geek here. A while back I did my top 100 games of all time. In that top 10 was a social deduction game that was all about trying to figure out who was a villager and who was a werewolf howling at the moon. Today we're going to go way back in time, even before that, to the prequel, but yet it's still coming out now. Weird, kind of like a time machine. Kind of like Star Wars, prequels, after, whatever. Today we're looking at the prequel to One Night Ultimate Werewolf, which is One Night Ultimate Vampire, where I want to suck your blood. It is for up to, I think it's for up to 10 players, 3 to 10 players, and it takes about 10 minutes to play. It's got some new mechanisms, obviously lots of new characters. Let me show you how it's played, how it's the same, how it's different, and then I'll tell you what I finally think on the other side. In One Night Ultimate Vampire, essentially there's 3 different teams. There are the vampire teams, which are these 4 characters. There's the assassins, which are on their own team, and the rest of these guys are villagers. People will become roles secretly, different things will change throughout the game, and at the end of a quick 5 to 10 minute time, basically these guys are trying to make sure a villager gets killed, or a villager is trying to make sure that a vampire gets killed and people win as teams. In a big overview, that's kind of how it goes. Now we have a mat here. This does not come with the game, but it is available for additional purchase, and it does make it quite nice to have the cards slide on here and has some really nice artwork. So, some language here. These are called role cards, and new for One Night Vampire are called marks, and these will do different things. Let me tell you sort of how a round works. Now here I basically have all the role cards, again, face up and all the marks face down. In a normal game, everybody would get a role card and a mark of clarity, and both of these would be face down. Nobody would be able to see it, but for the video purposes, I'm obviously going to keep them face up for a while to explain what happens. Now, also, any of the characters that use specific marks in the game, if, like, for example, the diseased player is in play, the disease mark will be face down, and any marks that aren't being used will be face up, because some marks are going to be moving back and forth, and make sure you don't put it in the wrong spot. So, but again, for this, I'm going to be leaving these face up so you can see how things work. Now in this case, I have all 14 characters in the entire game. The maximum amount of characters that will ever be in a game is 13, because you always have 3 characters in the middle, and there's 10 players. So there would be 10 role cards and 3 in a real game, but here I have all of the characters and all of them lined up here. Now on the top left, you can see a bunch of character sort of markers there. And what this does, this goes in a specific order from -8 all the way down to +7 as we go down. And this is the order that people are going to wake up and do things. And you can see we have the copycat and then a bunch of vampires and then diseased and cupid, investigator, instigator, priest, assassin, and apprentice assassin. And that's the end of the Dusk phase. Those people are all going to be messing with those marks and doing different things. And then everybody's going to be able to wake up and look at their mark secretly to see if it's still clarity or not, because you can change the mark you have will change things that you do and can actually also make you a vampire as well. After that happens, everyone will then close their eyes again, and 3 possible roles, if they're in the game, will do certain things about moving marks and moving roles and doing certain things like that. Now there is an app for this that goes through the script. I highly recommend you use this, and you can actually select some of the other games in this series like One Night Ultimate Werewolf and Daybreak, but here we have Vampire selected. You can select or unselect the characters that are on here. There's all different settings, so you can change how long the timer is, the game timer, the background type of music. You can select many different background music. You can do different narration, lots of options. But when you get this going, you hit play, and it's Eric Summer going through this script. And so this is the way to do it, as it tells you how to do everything. So I'm going to go through the script for all these guys so you understand how they all work. I'm going to leave the roles face up, even though in a real game they'd be face down, but I am going to put these markers face down, because this will actually help you see how things work a little bit. The copycat's the first one to wake up. Everyone's eyes are closed, and the copycat will wake up. He will look at one of these 3 cards, which would be face down in the middle, and then he'd become that player, and when that player is called later, he'll do that player's action. So essentially, he's going to become one of these 3 characters for the rest of the game. Copycat would close his eyes, and then the 3 vampires, if they are there, would open their eyes. Now right now, the master's in the middle, so he's nobody, so he wouldn't open his eyes, but if he was out there, he would do so along with the vampire and the count. So the vampires are going to open their eyes, and they're going to place the vampire mark on somebody. So maybe they take this, and they put it on Cupid, and they take Cupid's and they put it back where the vampire mark was. Now, if we're playing with the Renfield character, the vampires would then would point at the person that they gave the mark to, which is Cupid. They'd point at this person, and then they'd close their eyes, but they'd keep pointing. Then the Count would open his eyes by himself, and he would take the mark of fear and put it in front of any non-vampire player, and one that doesn't already have the mark of vampire. So maybe he gives it to this player, and then this one goes here. What the mark of fear does is, if you remember, these players at night, after everyone's woken up between dusk and night, get to do some actions. If when you wake up and you look at your mark, if it's the mark of fear, you don't do a night action if you're supposed to. The Count would close his eyes, and Renfield would wake up. Now the vampires are still pointing with their eyes closed at Cupid because they gave them the mark of the vampire. So now Renfield knows who got the mark of the vampire, and he knows who the vampires are because they're pointing. He will then take the mark of the bat and place it on himself. Now Renfield is on the vampire team. He's not a vampire, but he wins if the vampires win. He also wins if himself gets killed. At this point, Renfield would close his eyes, the vampires would put their hands down, and the diseased player would wake up. They would take the mark of the disease and put it on a player to their left or right. So they could put it on one of these two players because diseased is there, and maybe she swaps the mark there with the copycat. The diseased player, if anybody points at him at the end of the voting, cannot win. Even if their team would normally win, if you point at the diseased player, you can't win. The diseased would close her eyes, and Cupid would wake up. She would give out the 2 marks of love to 2 people. Maybe she puts it here, and maybe she puts it here. Now those 2 players are in love. They'll do some things later that I'll show. And either player that's in love, if the other one dies, that one dies with them. So they want to keep them alive. Then the Cupid would close their eyes, and the instigator would wake up, and they would give the mark of the traitor to somebody. So maybe she gives the mark of traitor to him. And what happens is, if you are the one with the mark of the traitor, you want someone on your team to die. The instigator would close their eyes, and the priest would wake up and give 2 marks of clarity, one to himself and one to somebody else. And maybe he goes here, and this traitor one is now moved to the clarity. Then the priest would close his eyes. Then the assassin would wake up, and they would place the mark of the assassin on a specific player. Let's say he gives it to this player. Now the assassin will only win if the player with this mark of assassin at the end dies, wherever it happens to be. Even if this player dies at the end, as long as the player with that dies, they win. Now keeping his eyes open, if there was an apprentice assassin, in this case there's not because she's in the middle, but if she was out there, this apprentice assassin would open their eyes and they would see who the assassin is. The apprentice assassin wins if the assassin dies. If they don't see an assassin, they then act as the assassin and move this assassin icon or mark to somebody else. Now at this point, we've gone through all the Dusk actions. Then there's a break. Everybody will wake up and look at their own mark to see if they've been changed or not. Then everybody will close their eyes again, and then the marksman will wake up. And he will look at the mark of one player, and then the roll card of a different player. Then he'll close his eyes. The pickpocket will then open his eyes, and he will steal a mark of another player. He will look at his new mark and then place it down in front of him, and then he'll close his eyes. Finally, the gremlin wakes up, and he can swap either 2 roll cards from somebody or 2 marks from somebody, but not both. So maybe he swaps these 2 like this. Or he could have swapped marks, but he doesn't look at them. Then everybody's going to be asked to basically move their card and mark a little bit so that they can't tell if they've been moved, and then everybody will wake up and the timer will start. This is really where the game happens, is during this sort of 5-ish to 10-ish minutes. Essentially, everybody is trying to figure out who's who. They're saying what they did. They're trying to catch people in lies. They're trying to say, hey, I saw this. No, I didn't see this. And it's all about trying to find out the truth. And the vampires are trying to get the villagers killed, the villagers are trying to get the vampires killed, and the assassin's on his team alone. He's trying to win by himself. At the end of the timer, once people are giving up information, and as these are going, these marks can be given. This guy could say, hey, I was the priest, I saw clarity, and someone might say, no, I was the priest, this is in question. So these counters now act as trying to say who people are. Because remember, all these are face down during the game. You wouldn't be able to see them. So these kind of help people say who they are, who you think people are. All these are being used. At the end, everybody's going to point at somebody. It's going to say 3, 2, 1, vote. Everybody will point at the person that they want to kill. Whoever has the most points at them will die. Now, if the master is actually in play, what happens is if the master is pointing at one of the vampires, the count or the vampire, and one of those two, the person that he was pointing at has the most votes and would normally die, he doesn't die because the master protected them, and then the person who has the second most would die. Once you figure out who's dying, everyone flips over their roll cards and their marks, and we actually see who's really who got changed, and who really won the game. And you can run an epic battle, which is using some of the people from One Night Ultimate Werewolf and mixing it with One Night Ultimate Vampire. Essentially in this, more than one player will be killed, and so it's the player with the most votes and then the player with the second most votes. The vampire team will win if at least one werewolf's killed and no vampires killed. The villagers will win if at least one vampire and at least one werewolf killed. The werewolf team will win if at least one vampire is killed, and this is probably supposed to say no werewolves killed. Alright, well there's One Night Ultimate Vampire, obviously based off a game that I love, One Night Ultimate Werewolf. You're probably in one of two different camps. Either you've played One Night Ultimate Werewolf before, or you haven't. Let me first just give some general thoughts of the game. The game itself is still pretty similar in the One Night camp. The One Night Ultimate Werewolf, the One Night Ultimate Werewolf Daybreak, which was another standalone game that could also be mixed in with the others. It's still in that same vein, very similar to those, yet there is quite a bit of a difference with those marks. It really does change the game up quite a bit into this little mini genre within a social deduction realm. So as it speaks with the three of those different games, those marks really do change it up. You're no longer just worried about, did someone switch my card? Now you're worried about, well, what did people do to my marks? And so as a second level of, say, depth, and at the same time a second level of complexity, which can be good or could be bad depending on which camp that I just mentioned you may be sitting in. It's cool because you get a chance, you have all these Dusk actions, and they get a chance to look at look at your mark and see if you're still clarity or not. But then there's some other people that can still mess around, and now you've got two different things to think about, my mark and my roll. Some of the rolls are similar to some of the other ones, like I think the pickpocket's close to the robber and things like that from the original version. There are some rolls that are pretty similar, but yet still a little bit different. But even with the rolls that are similar, because there's two different things going on between the rolls and the marks, they feel different and they do different things. So that's sort of the general basis of what I think of the game. So now opinion-wise, this game, okay, so let's talk about the two different camps. You've played it before or you haven't played it before. If you have played One Night Ultimate Werewolf before, and you love it, and you've played it a ton, like myself, I think I've played it maybe 70 times or so, and you're ready for a new challenge, this is a good successor to that. Now granted, I will be honest and say, I played the original version over 50 times, probably 60 or 70. Daybreak I haven't played nearly as much. I'm still exploring that area. For me, if I have already played both of those, or I just want something with the same element but deeper with the more complexity, this is a good idea to do that because the marks do change things around. If you are trying to bring new people into this game that have not played One Night Ultimate Werewolf, or you're one of the camps that have not played it before, I don't quite think this is the one that you want to start with. Because of that second level of depth and complexity, there's a lot more moving parts to grasp onto. So if you've never played any of these series before, the best one still to get is the original One Night Ultimate Werewolf. This is a step up in complexity that you might grow into. I'm not saying you can't figure it out right away. There's just more moving parts. It'll take a little bit longer to kind of think up all the tricks. Now the people that have played those, when you play this game, it's almost as if you're playing One Night Ultimate Werewolf all over again, like the first time, where you're just exploring new characters, exploring how things work, exploring cool ways that the werewolves can trick other people. It's like you're playing the game, but because there's more depth and different ways to play, it's almost like you're reliving that experience before. So if you loved One Night Ultimate Werewolf and you're kind of burnt out on it, like I almost am at that point now because I played it so many times, this is a good next step. I still think I prefer the original better, but maybe it's just because I just need more and more time to kind of let this thing soak in. I think this is really for those that have played the first one for sure, maybe even the second one, played it so much that they're ready for a new challenge in that same world. And for you, I think you'll like this. If you've never played any of them, I'd wait. I'd probably get the other ones first, just because we tried to bring someone in that is not a huge gamer, but they played some light stuff and they hadn't played the original, and it took them a lot longer for them to ramp up to this than we did to the original, than they would to the original one. So that's that. Now, playing the epic battles, it's an awesome idea that you're able to do that. Obviously, you need higher player counts to really make that work. And having the two people die, I like how you can mix those together. I like how he's making them all fit together. Now, the genre as a whole is becoming quite crowded, this social deduction. Even though this really changes how One Night Ultimate Werewolf's played, it doesn't bring anything like super envelope pushing or brand new into the social deduction element. So if you didn't like One Night Ultimate Werewolf, this change I don't think is going to make you like this game. It's not doing things like Deception Murder Hong Kong, which was a social deduction game that came out late last year that really did some new things in that genre. Nothing earth-shattering new here, but if you're used to that system, it is new. So hopefully that gives you a feeling for if this is for you, if it's not for you. Overall, I liked it because I like the series, but it's probably not best for beginners. It's better for the more experienced ones, and you can really scratch a new layer of depth and a new layer of complexity, new ways to lie to your buddies, and that is One Night Ultimate Vampire.
This video was sponsored by Miniature Market's Review Corner. The Review Corner features podcasts, video, and written game reviews by gamers for gamers. Miniature Market, the online gaming superstore. Thousands of board games, discounted prices. Check them out at miniaturemarket.com.